Well, welcome everyone to the Northland Post Message Podcast. I know it's been a minute since we have done a podcast, and that's kind of been with intention. We took a few weeks off to just kind of spend some time diving into some things around the church here and spending time on the series that we've been in called From the Heart. And so, but today I'm sitting back with Dave, and we're going to just kind of recap some thoughts from this series. We've got one more week coming up this Sunday, but before we start our new series, but I just want to recap some things and just spend some time just discussing how this has been going and what some things have been happening through this series and that we've been talking about. First thing I want to start off with, though, Dave, today is let's just talk about what God's been doing in our church. I know we've kind of mentioned this from time to time in the sermons, but man, there's just been some really cool things happening in our church here lately.
Yeah, no, it's been incredible to see the way God has been working. And we do this every week as a staff. We sit down and we say, let's take 5-10 minutes, and we have to put a timer on it and say, where do you see God at work? And almost every time we want to go longer than that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes. And one of the blessings about being in ministry sometimes is you get a front row seat to the work of God. You just get to see it. You hear the stories, the back end stories of a guy who might have fought an addiction. I talked to a guy this last week. He was like, I was on the edge of going back just one more time, and yet I didn't go back. Wow. And I thought to myself, man, that's cool. He told me with tears in his eyes, I'm so grateful for our church because in the end, I got a text, I got a thing, and I'm here today because I didn't go back. And I thought, man, that's cool. After it's been a couple of years, what a really cool blessing.
Yeah.
I saw families this week as we're doing graduations and just kind of going from like graduation to graduation. And I thought about their start to our church. And here they are celebrating their kid. They're at a graduation. And their kid may have started at our church, or they decided as a family just 2 years ago to start coming. And I got to these graduation parties, and one of them, I remember they had a Bible out, and they said they want everybody to put like a thing. And I was like, man, that's really cool. This particular kid was somebody who just got a Bible for graduating from Matt, and then got a Bible another year ago from baptism. So he got a Bible at baptisms, and he was like, and my parents bought me a Bible because we were all kind of starting our faith journey together. So he has 5 Bibles or 4 Bibles, brand new Bibles this year. And I was like, man, what a cool testament to the way your life has changed as a direct result of God. And your whole family is valuing the Word of God. We had just a fun kind of, we've had those waters in our baptistry.
Yeah, so full.
And it just seems like, man, it's just like splashing water all over the place. One of our guys who does just kind of maintenance around here also does the laundry for us after baptisms. He's like, am I doing them every week? He's like, I'm running a dry cleaning unit here. Every week I got to go get some towels, and he's not complaining. It's a part of what we get to do, man. Right. We've just seen people jumping in the waters to get baptized.
And more coming this weekend.
That's right. It seems like every single weekend, especially at the 9 o'clock service. And so if you're in a 10 o'clock service or 10:45, I need you to know your church is baptizing people, and we need some people in that 10:45. Right. Be praying for them. But the 9 o'clock just seems like there's every single week somebody's showing up there. What have you seen? What have been some thoughts on your list?
I was going to say, if you didn't bring up baptisms, I was going to. How can you not bring up baptisms? It's just so cool to see that. Something I get to do each week is we send those emails out. Hey, such and so is getting baptized. Here's who's doing it, all that. And so, my job is to go plug that into our plan. So every week I've been busy plugging that into our plan, and it seems like, here comes another name. And so, I was going to bring that up if you didn't. But
you made a graphic that we were going to put up with the number of baptisms.
Year to date, yeah.
Year to date. We're going to use it in a couple of weeks or next week or whatever, and we can't keep it up to date because every time we're about ready, like, okay, go back and change the graphic, Mike. We've got more. Yeah.
I just got it updated yesterday, and I think I've got to update it again, actually. So, it's really cool. I was going to say, something that people may not be aware of within the church is that we, this last week, we got to go do a leadership retreat.
Oh, yeah.
And you and I and Jonathan and Matt, Angela got to get away and just overnight real quick, but spend some time in a very nice lodge facility and just spent time. What I appreciated about it was just to, in the midst of all this busyness of ministry, all this good things
Yeah.
happening, just a pause and where we just went through a book of the Bible together.
Right.
And we just talked about it and we asked God to speak to us and we prayed a specific prayer of, Lord, what do you want to do in Northland in this next season?
Yeah.
And so I love that even in the midst of what God is doing in this season, we're still taking time and seeking and praying for him to lead us into the next season.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so awesome.
Yeah, that's the win for our hearts, right? Like we're getting away, we're doing all this work, we're seeing it, and there's stresses. People, they know that there's stress in churches, but we feel it differently. And what we need more than just, more work or more time is more of a relationship with God. And that just fills our cups. It gets us going and we get more like energized, ready to go. And it is good. It's good for the soul.
Yeah. Something else more related to the series that we've seen recently is just been really cool. I think you or Jonathan shared about how there was people waiting after service one day to, hey, I got to get signed up for recurring giving or something of that nature. I don't remember the story exactly, but just seeing people go, you know what, I need to respond to this.
Yeah, almost every week in this series, we've had 3 to 5 different like giving units, and I don't know who they are, but Jonathan does. He has to kind of work the back end to make sure we're all organized. Set up either giving or reoccurring giving every single week of this series. And it goes back to kind of this idea that we started with, that this is from the heart and it's a step of faith. Yeah. And that particular individual you're talking about said this to me that second week. He said, I'm not leaving because God's been putting this on my heart for years. Mm-hmm. And every single year I walk away and I think, you know what? Yeah, I'll do that next year or the next time. And he goes, something about just being here this weekend makes me think I'm not waiting anymore. Yeah. Like God wants me to be obedient now. And that's been the heart of our series. We've truly wanted people to see this as an act of faith, just like anything else we talk about. Meaning when we talk about, praying or reading your Bible or, avoiding sin in some ways or growing in any area, growing in giving is a part of your faith as well. Yeah. And that's something Matt's going to be talking about this weekend when it comes to one particular passage in 2 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians chapter 8, I believe it is, where Paul says to grow in the act and the generosity of giving. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing for our church.
Yeah. What I find interesting about that and just this whole series and just the getting to share about the direct outcomes of it is I've watched you the last couple weeks somewhat struggle because it's hard to do a series on giving. So why is it hard to do a series on giving? Talk a little more about just the challenge that you've been facing. What's the biggest challenge you've had?
No, that is true. And you've seen it. Some of those on the backside have said that. I would say a couple of things. There is the stigma that always is around this subject in churches. There's enough people who've done it in the most incorrect ways. Right. And because of that, it makes it harder on the rest of us. And so if you've had so many of these people out there, and it's not so much these days, there used to be these TV pastors, and You'd see them come up and they'd give you this pitch on if you do it well, you give enough, God's going to bless you abundantly more. And maybe their heart was in it for some right reasons, but then sometimes you're like, man, 2 jets and a private yacht, that's probably not the right reasons. But other than that, it's created a stigma that I think is something you face, and I fight that challenge. I never want to be those guys.
Hold on, pause. You don't have a private yacht?
If you consider whatever floats in our bathroom tub as a private yacht, yeah. Um, yeah. So no, and the other side of it is I never. I think there was a side of me too. Like I grew up around people who were not in church,
Mm,
and so one of the biggest barriers for them at church was money. And
yeah.
it's kind of a unique thing because of the TV pastors and other places where it felt like it was all about money. And I just remember when I first got into ministry, and I still have to kind of work through this a little bit, hearing some of my family just say, "Well, don't be like one of those people."
Mm,
And so I think about it, I pray about it, and I process through it. And for whatever reason, this particular topic has been harder for me personally because of this than any other topic we've actually talked about.
yeah.
So we could talk about the depths of theology in other areas. We can talk about controversial things that maybe are more political in nature that people would say that's a politically hot button. You can't talk about that. Like,
Right.
I don't mind talking about that. I don't mind talking about doubts in faith or even, apologetical stuff. But this topic has always been a tough one for me. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I struggle. I get up on Tuesday when I usually write and I just feel a heaviness and it doesn't go away until Sunday. And then I wake up on Tuesday and think I got to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which is, I think, fitting though that the series is from the heart,
Oh,
because the thing you want to avoid, if possible, we could have just not done this series. But
mm-hmm.
however, there's a blessing
Right.
that is
Yeah.
missed out if we don't do this series. And what is that blessing?
So I think it's twofold. One, I think there's the blessing that we receive from being able to say this area of our life is something we want to honor God with.
Mm,
I think there's a blessing in just saying, God, there's this one area that is always fighting for my attention. I almost will spend my entire lives pursuing at some level or trying to make enough to survive on. Whatever the
right.
thing is, there's a blessing in saying this area, like all the other areas of my life, are 100% surrendered to you. And so, God, I want to honor you with my money. And I do believe there's so many opportunities for that. So I think there's one to side that. Number two, I think when we see it, not only from the aspect of what it does for us, I think what God does through our money when we give,
Yeah.
there's a blessing. And meaning our church wouldn't exist without people who gave sacrificially.
Right.
Our staff wouldn't be here. None of the things that we get to do, including the partnerships we have in our community, would not exist if that didn't happen. And I've had to lean in on that and say, man, there's a sweet blessing to that. I know that. I love that I can contribute in some way. And it's an act of faith, but it's also an opportunity to see God at work. And so there is a blessing in that. And it has been a blessing. And that's part of the other side that I've seen. And the reason why I've overcome the challenge for myself is that I've seen it on our team, our staff, and what it can do right here in our community. Meaning when we see people give generously, man, it changes here, but it changes us to then take the mission, the gospel out
Yeah.
into the world we live in.
Yeah. I think immediately about the boy with the lunch
Oh,
that he
yeah.
brings to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think about, sometimes it's easy to look around this place and, our church in general and just see, okay, here's a building and yeah, these people gave sacrificially for this to be here. And
Yeah.
we're so grateful. But don't miss out on the piece where God does exponentially more than we can think or ask.
Mm-hmm.
Don't miss out on the piece where when we partner with God, he can expand what's given to
Yeah.
even so much more. And so this boy gives this lunch to Jesus, and that how is 5 loaves and 2 fish going to feed 5,000 people?
Yeah.
But it does, and then there's 12 baskets full, because in the hands of God, he can do so much more. And so what we're able to do with just a little bit that we're really trying to hold on to as well. We're thinking, oh man, this will take care of this or do that. But in the hands of God, how much more can it do in the kingdom? And so there's a principle there, and there's an element of faith in who God is and the reality of God and what He can do, that is It is. It's a matter of the heart. It really. How much faith and trust do I have in God? Um, not in the sense of, am I going to get this back,
Right, right.
but in the
It's
sense
not an
of,
investment in that way.
right. But in the sense of, is this not a? Am I? This isn't a waste.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually going to bring kingdom expansion in an exponential way. I
Yeah.
think it's an awesome thing.
I would just say in reality also, when people do this, they not only are generous in this way, they become generous in a lot of other ways. They not only grow in their faith in this way, their faith grows in all the other ways. I do believe that there's just I would say a ripple effect to this act within our lives. There's just something that happens. It's like a stone you throw in there and you do it. And it just has this ripple effect that goes across the pond. And I've seen people, in fact, the people I look up to most in my faith, that will share stories of what God did in them when they decided in this one area to be faithful in, what God continues to do in them. There are some who still show up, and this is what I said this last weekend, and I love this, is like, there are people who invested deeply in this place, and they've got to sit back, watch, and see what God's doing for not just a couple of years or 5 years, but since we started this place right here on the corner of Topeka Boulevard and Vinegar Road, they sit back and they are cheering us on. Like, we want to see God at work in this place. And things have changed exponentially. But the heart, the mission, the desire that started right here and has continued to be what hopefully the church is, meaning it's more than a building, is still happening. And so I want to be on that same side one day, to look back and think, man, I may not be on the front line doing things, but I want to see God's work at hand and know that I was faithful in that whole process. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump into a little bit of just kind of each message, and we'll just this is a laid back podcast today. Okay, Dave?
Great.
All right,
Okay.
so
I didn't go and prepare.
well, and I did very little on purpose,
So,
just because I figured this would be more of an ebb flow discussion. We've got so much content here. We definitely won't be able to cover everything,
Great.
but jumping back to Genesis, in the very first message where you talked about the heart comes first. And we talked about how Abraham gave a tenth of his spoils to this kind of mysterious character, this priestly king, Melchizedek. And, long before there was the law, long before there was these rules or mandates given by God on how to give, Abraham just gives out of his heart. And so you notice that this giving was one of the kind of purest forms of giving, that generosity. It was driven by command. It was driven by just how God had been good to Abraham. And so let's just talk a little more about Abraham, Melchizedek. We can go anywhere we want to go on this, but just the idea of Abraham's generosity in that moment.
That's great. I think you're also trying to like fish for a
a
conversation
little
that
bit.
Be a rabbit trail. No, I love this moment because we started this series this way because I look at this particular situation and say, you don't need a book, chapter, and verse to know how to do the right thing. Some people, that's what they're looking for, and particularly spiritually minded people are just like, man, you need a book, chapter, and verse to tell me what I need. And it's like, well, one of the best things about Abraham is that before any of that ever existed, he had faith, a faith that said, I don't need a book, chapter, and verse. I know what I know about our God, and I'm going to believe it even when I don't know something about our God. I don't understand it. And so Paul and others, particularly Paul, he leans in on Abraham's faith, which set him apart, even before things like circumcision and other things that people would then go back to and say, well, he had circumcision. No, actually, children of Abraham are children of faith, and they don't need all these other things. And actually, John the Baptist said that to a group of people. He could raise up people, children of Abraham. Yeah, he didn't need this. And so what I love about that is it tells us like, hey, there's something intrinsically right about this. this genuine response to God is what it comes down to. You know in your heart that an act of worship, an act of generosity doesn't require a book, chapter, and verse, and even a law. It requires a heart that says, I'm willing to give.
Mm.
And I want to give it as a response to a God who's already given me everything I've ever had. Giving is part of that heart that I see in Abraham.
Yeah. I think about, just in a practical sense, my kids, I, and you'll identify with this too. We give our kids instructions on things to do sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Clean up your room, pick this up, do that or whatever. And of course, when it goes great, they do it. However, when you've got younger kids, still, and maybe this happens when they're older too, but sometimes it's a little bit of a teeth pull situation, right?
Tell me about it.
Like, hey, I need you to pick that up. The other day it was a brownie on the floor, and all hell was breaking loose over there was a brownie on the floor that needed to be picked up. However, there's these moments and when the kids just do something, and it's just like, here a while back, Ben comes in the room and he's just like, "Hey, Dad, I cleaned up all the sinks." Like he had wiped out all the sinks, and I'm like,
Wow. Okay.
no one asked you to do this. No one told you to do this. No one mandated you to do this. And I think about it as a dad, my heart, when my kids obey me and they just do what I ask them to do, yeah, it's good,
Yeah.
But when my kid just does something out of their own heart,
Mm-hmm.
the joy that I get from that is so much more.
Right.
And so I think about, God's not just wanting to mandate us what to do and tell us what to do, and we follow that. In fact, Paul would go on to say that kind of way of life and that way of thinking brings about death.
Right.
The law brings about death, but there's this joy that we can bring to God's heart, and He desires for us to have that. He desires for us to be those that aren't just following a mandate, but our hearts are transformed in a new way to actually honor Him and follow Him and serve others.
And you're exactly right. Man, I love that story. You think about kids, and it is hard to motivate them, but when they do something on their own volition, when they do it
Mhm.
and they just want to kind of do their thing, and you notice it, man, you have to stop back and think, man, this is amazing. Like, this is exactly what I wanted. And you're right.
Yeah.
I think the Father in heaven that we're a part of is looking for us to say, we're not doing this because we have to, but God, we want to do this.
And I think the shift is it's one view is almost a little bit self-serving and one isn't. When I tell them to do something, let's say someone's, trying to figure out what their chapter verse is,
Mhm.
how much do I got to give? When do I got to get all that kind of stuff? Ultimately, it's to make sure they're good,
Yep.
to make sure they're in, am I doing this right? Not because sometimes, maybe occasionally, someone wants to be right, or righteous in what they do. But more often, you see people kind of, well, I just want to make sure I'm doing enough to, get by.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, when Ben cleaned those sinks, he was coming looking for me
Yeah.
because he wanted me to feel the joy and see the joy in me,
Right.
and that he had done something above and beyond that he wasn't even asked to do, but from his heart. And I think about that and I go, when we get this and deep in our hearts and deep in our spirits, it's ultimately about a heart that wants to honor God and a heart that wants to see God, rejoice in who we are and what we do, versus just self-serving and making sure I'm doing enough to not get in trouble.
Yeah. It's you-centered at that point.
Yeah.
You're just doing what you need to do to not get in trouble, or doing it to check the box, to be right or righteous. And I think that's where Jesus steps in and redefines that for us. And He calls it out. I mean, in Matthew 23, it's probably the one location He calls out a bunch of Pharisees, and they're the first ones to say, I'm doing it right. We're literally tithing on our mint, our dill, our spices. We are giving a tenth of everything we have. And He uses a phrase or a refrain that's throughout the Old Testament that I desire mercy, not sacrifice in this regard. I desire your heart, is what I would say, more than your obedience and to be right this way.
Yeah.
Jesus has this way of communicating in such a way that says it's not just about doing it to check a box. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
and that's what I think the New Testament version of that would look like.
Yeah. That chapter, Matthew 23, and I'm using the NASB version, but it titles that section Phariseeism exposed.
Yeah, that's good.
It's just
I
like
like
he's
that.
just revealing the true nature of their heart
Yeah.
in that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the next message that part 2 of the series was a dwelling built with willing hearts, and Jonathan did this particular message, but he went back and he looked at the tabernacle and how the people, kind of brought everything and gave to this idea of space for God to come and dwell among them. A couple of things that came out of that series was just these kind of real raw data points around our church. And I don't
Oh,
know
yeah.
how much you remember that. And I honestly don't remember off the top of my head kind of some of the numbers and things. But I remember seeing those data points and just going, wow, this is actually something that would be really simple, for us to just kind of adjust and do. And then what could come about from that
Yeah.
and some of the vision. So let's just talk a little bit just about some of that practical vision of like, if we fill that gap in our giving here at Northland, what are some things that we can see happen and do here in the ministry?
Yeah, and that's, Jonathan kind of looked at just our per person giving and then benchmark that against just kind of churches that are like us in the same region and where we're at. And there's always factors. There's a ton
Right.
of factors that kind of play in, whether that's, the church is well established or it's newer. If newer families are showing up, sometimes it's just location. There's so many factors. But by and large, we are just, per person giving behind. And so he just said, if we even got up to like, I would say the average or closer to the average, that would be a substantial change for us. And what that might mean are things he mentioned, which was just the way we think about things like our staff salaries. That's one of the things that he brought up. Those are things that when we process through stuff, no one ever thinks about it on the other side
Right.
as much as we do. And there's always a desire. Like, we love our team. We want to take the best care. We want to create a great staff culture. But we also want to be very competitive with the way we pay people. That's part of what we do. And I think we do a fair job. We really do.
Yeah.
But our hope and desire is to continue to increase that. And when we say that, it's just like any other industry, except for within this industry, it's a little bit harder than maybe in a for-profit type of way. And so Jonathan also mentioned this, but we'll get to this in a minute. It's just that in every other industry, that cost of doing business, meaning electricity, whatever overhead expenses you have, you can then up the price of your product to offset that cost. In the church, we just don't have that luxury. We don't charge people for anything unless it's like a camp or whatever, and that's just to cover the cost. And so if giving were to change in this regard, the things that we would be able to do, the margin to be able to do it in, meaning things that we would be able to accomplish, would be so much easier and better. Now, God's always provided, and we've been able to do stuff. But sometimes it's like what you mentioned earlier, like it's loaves and fishes. Like, we're praying over something and saying, God, we've got 5 loaves, 2 fishes, and we've got a bunch of people here. How do we handle this? Or how do we change? And that's great. We'd love to get to a point one day where we would say, hey, we want to go above and beyond. We want to be a generous church in this regard. And the curriculum we choose, when I first got here for children's ministry, we were literally cutting coupons, like to figure out which stuff we can buy, what we can't buy. And we've just been trying to increase that number as we go along. And we'd like to get to a certain point where they might have extra, and they can then say, okay, what else, God, can we do?
Yeah.
If budget wasn't a number, how could we increase this? What could look different? What might we dream and think about for this next season? And so those are things that change whenever people all kind of rally around this. They all kind of get involved and say, hey, we're going to do this collectively as a church. We're going to increase our giving. It does impact ministry in a unique and incredible way.
Yeah. I think about here several years ago, I heard a pastor, you would know his name, but he talked about how their church, they wanted to be strategically at a point where they could just have funds set aside to do whatever God might put in front of them to do.
Yeah.
And how that was just such a radical shift of not just, hey, we're just trying to make sure we can, open
Pay
the
the
doors,
bills,
pay the
open the
bills,
door,
that kind
yeah.
of, but we actually want to be strategically positioned as a church to just be ready to say yes when God puts something in front of us that is a yes thing that clearly from Him, and not have to go, oh well, now let's go back to the books. It's just a matter of, hey, we've been preparing and planning for
Right,
this, and
right.
the kind of faith that comes from that, in that standpoint.
No, I'd love that, man. I mean, there are things, and you know this, Micah, but I want to say them out loud. Is if we had a chance, there are so many things that we'd pursue around here. There's partnerships that we'd want to expand. We're talking today, and I don't know exactly when the podcast is going to come out, but today we're talking with Compassion because that's a partner of ours, and we've got tons and tons of students down there. We want to be able to start taking trips back again, and we want to start kind of developing that partnership even further with them to do more. We've got stuff that happens right here locally. We have Lifeline and Topeka Rescue Mission that are outside, but inside of the walls, we have a growing student body, and we said this year, and it's been incredible. We have more students than ever, and so that's created a bit of a gap for us because with the amount of students we have, the camp, we've had a deficit this year. It was our first year planning with a deficit for camp. And we could have raised the price of what we did for like our camp prices. But again, that's never been our desire. We don't
Right.
like doing that. And it's just a part of the way you have to do things. I mean, the cost of gas goes up, and so does our price for buses, and so things change. But we've tried really hard to keep those costs down because that's our goal is not money, but to have kingdom impact. And so we had to raise money this year for stuff. Whereas if we had the ability, we could say, man, we're going to take that and then now go do something else.
Yeah.
There's other things on our list. Like
Yeah.
one day, there's things that we want to see take place around here. And not only here in our community. I think there's a lot to that. This was one of those years where even before we went through the series, we decided another church in our community asked us for help in their expansion. And we took a step of faith and we said, yes, let's go ahead and do that. We know we have other things going on here. There was some money in our missions category and some other things that we just said, if we do this right, I think we can go ahead and write a check to them.
Yeah.
But what would it look like if one day we didn't even have to think twice about that? We didn't have to, wonder like, okay, how are we going to do this?
Right.
Because God always presents different things that come up, and we want to just actively say yes and help out.
Yeah. And that just kind of goes back to, I think people heard this from Jonathan a little bit, but, we budget, we stay within those budgets.
Yep.
We do all of the best part that we can on our end.
Yeah.
And this series definitely, sometimes you can get into these things and it sounds like maybe once again, oh, we're asking for money because, we want to do more things or we're not making it one or the other. And that's not the case. It's just a matter of, if this is your church, if this is your home,
Right.
what if you bought into the vision with us of seeing this place expand and seeing the ministry God's doing here expand and thinking about, Maybe you're somebody who stepped into the waters of baptism a couple weeks ago, or your kid did, or your parent did, or your
Mm-hmm.
uncle or your aunt did, or someone, a friend that you invited to church, or your coworker stepped into those waters. And to see what God is doing in this place and to celebrate it, but then to go back and go, now how's God calling me to be more part of it?
Yeah.
And there's more ways than just giving money when it comes to that. There's, the service, and we've seen an uptick in volunteers. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I think Danny was just telling us yesterday, we've got so many more people signing up to volunteer.
Right.
Great. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And so it's more about, do you want to be a part of this? do
Yeah.
you want to be a part of what God's doing at Northland? Do you
Where's
call
your heart in
Northland
this?
home? Yeah.
Where's your heart? And that's what we go back to. I'll say this, like, we are doing one of the only series ever, and I would say this nationally, on generosity, and we're not doing a campaign. We're not making you
Right.
sign a pledge. We've not put anything in front of anyone outside of just sharing the message week in and week out. And that could be a miss. I'll say that. In church leadership, people might say that's a miss. I would also say it's an opportunity for people to say, if you're being honest right now, the heart behind what we're doing is going after your heart. Because we haven't made an ask, we haven't made a pledge, we haven't said anything else besides this is what God's word calls us to. And there are going to be words that are going to be pretty tough along the way that maybe people are trying to adjust to. We did this in week 3, and we can go there. But we talked about tithing. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about tithing. I don't think we've ever just talked about tithing in this way. But in week 3, that's what we brought up. And it was one of my hardest messages for me to think through and process. How do I want to communicate tithing without sounding legalistic?
Yeah.
And that was my goal in that time. I don't know if it came across.
I remember telling you, you kind of the very next day were like, man, that was tough. Like it was, and I remember telling you,
don't walk away from these messages feeling like you hit a grand slam. Yeah.
And I remember telling you, and I genuinely meant this in private when I said this to you, and so I'll say it publicly. Like, that was probably one of the best messages on tithing I've ever heard, because I didn't walk away feeling like it was legalistic. And I think because that's where your heart was.
Yeah.
Once again, from the heart, it came from your heart in that way.
Yeah.
And we even had people in the room that day. It was Mother's Day, which I know was the other side of why you were.
That's part of why I felt a little bit like, oh man.
But we had people in the room that day, and you're going, moms have leveraged this day to get people here. And yet we talked about tithing, but there were so many people that were like, that was actually really good. That was something I needed to hear. And so, once again, your obedience to God in that, to just say, okay, this is what I got to do. Yeah. I could be doing a lot of other things right now. I could be talking about a lot of other things, yet it was a needed message. And so even in that, talking about this last week, and just how you talked about Abraham.
I want to go back real quickly to tithing real quickly, and a couple things. One, that week was maybe one of the biggest blessings for me after I got done. And just, I felt like I actually learned something about like God's heart in tithing. So that was kind of where at first I was like, man, I don't think I've ever thought about that, God's heart in tithing. Because it was never to receive something, but to give us, I would say this, like a way of thinking about giving that quite honestly requires a lot of faith. And that's what I would call predetermined giving.
Yeah.
Saying in advance, God, I want, before you give me anything, I want to bless, I want to make sure that my heart's set and positioned in a way that says you're there. And I love this because I do this with kids too. Like if I give my kids like not necessarily a rule, but maybe a rule, it's not always just because I want them to obey. It's because I think it's a good life lesson for them. This is how we treat one another. This is what we do in life. This is what we're going to say. This is how we respond to situations. I'm not giving you a rule to just obey. I'm giving you a way of life. And what I saw within that was God giving us a way of life, a way of thinking through generosity in such a way that says, even before you get, you think about giving. And when you do, you don't just think about the amount, because we can get caught up with that. Because if all honesty, like the amount is almost as negligible as anything in that particular part of giving. It's saying, I want to put even a percentage so you can kind of start thinking through this from the very beginning. And it was really good for me. I had one guy say to me, and I'll just kind of say this is a guy really close to me reached out and said, in a real honest way, he said, for a lot of years, I watched my family give to the church, and it was hard on me when I was watching them struggle and they could have done things. But I've come to learn over the course of time that their faithfulness has helped me be faithful in this area. And this area of tithing was like, after that week, he just like, I wanted to honor my parents again for the legacy they've left me in this area. And I thought, man, I love the transparency. There's probably times when you're a kid and maybe your parents were writing a check to the church and you're watching them like barely make it sometimes through that month, but they felt like they needed to do that. And I'm not saying they had to write the check or anything, but to see their level of faithfulness and then watch that play out in your own life and how that impacts you. It's big.
Yeah. It really is. Something that made me think about is Paul in Ephesians 4. He goes back in Psalm 68 is this psalm about this last Thursday was Ascension Thursday. People may not recognize that, but it was the day we kind of celebrate Jesus ascending,
right,
and being seated on the throne in heaven. But in there he goes back to Psalm 68, and in Ephesians 4:8 it says, when he ascended on high, which he's quoting Psalm 68 here, he led captivity captive, and he gave gifts to men. So reading those texts along each other, Psalm 68 and Ephesians 4:8. Psalm 68 doesn't say he gave gifts to men.
No.
Psalm 68 is a war psalm where it talks about he comes in basically and takes the spoils of war. He takes.
Yeah.
But Paul, reading Psalm 68 in the heart of Christ, he goes, no, but he gave gifts to men.
Oh, man.
And good. He reads Psalm 68 in what we would call a Christological way. And so, this last week you talked about essentially learning from Jesus,
right,
more than anything, this principle of giving, and that Jesus gives to the extent of giving his own life.
Yeah.
He says, no one takes my life, I give it freely.
Right. That's John 10.
And so, this is the person that we model everything after. This is the person that we give our whole lives to. This is the person we say, you know what, I surrender and I'll follow you, is the one who doesn't come in and just take the spoils of everything and say, okay, now you got to give to me. You think of the context in which Jesus comes into, and where the kings would come in and conquer, and then they would take the spoils of all that, and then they would set up then a tax upon the people. Now everything that you do, you have to give something to me from it. And it would be easy for us to look at something like tithing or giving in that way, but it's not in that way. Jesus' model of giving isn't a command in the sense of because I'm so great and I've taken over now, you got to do this.
Right.
But it's a model that he lives out with his own life,
right,
for us to follow. And so you're never going to outgive God is really the principle. Jonathan used that in communion this last week of this leader who says, hey, good news is I'm never going to ask you to do anything that I won't do myself. Bad news is I'm willing to do a whole lot. And I've had a leader say that to me before too. And that's essentially, that's what Jesus says to us is I'm never going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. But keep in mind, I gave my entire self.
Right.
I gave my entire life. And so
that's the model.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're called to. It's good, man. I'll say this, my homiletics professor would be real proud of you, Micah. Okay. So I preached on that passage in Ephesians 4. Didn't pick up on the difference between that and
really?
Psalm 60. Did you say 68?
68, yeah.
Yeah, and got called out in the middle of my class in front of everybody, and so I've been scarred for years.
Oh no! I'm sorry to bring that up.
No, I think it's great, man, because I get to see, man, you got there, so that's awesome. That same passage is like, it's different in Psalm 68 than it was in Ephesians 4. And what you said is so true, that he came and then gave gifts. He gives so generously. And so it is more blessed to give than to receive. And God has given so much to us in all of our lives, both the life that we have, the air we breathe, but then our salvation in his own Son.
Yeah.
And so, it's good. I can't wait for this week. I know Matt's going to get up this week and share the next one, but...
Do we want to go ahead and give people a hint where we're going after that? Or do we want to wait?
I think so. I've told a couple of people, and they're like, "Who? What?"
So you're hearing it from here first, or maybe you've heard it from Dave already. But we are going to start a series called "When God Moves," and it's going to be over the life of King Hezekiah. And you can find King Hezekiah both in 2 Chronicles and 2 Kings. Is that correct? Did I get that right? Okay. And so excited about that series. Looking forward to that. And so be sure and be inviting people and to come and hear about that. It's going to be a good series for everybody.
It's going to be crazy because this is one guy that many people would say, not on my radar, doesn't come up very often. And yet he's got some crazy fun stuff for us to talk about. Yeah.
All right. Well, if you made it this far with us today, we're so glad that you've taken time to just listen. And we hope that you've been encouraged. I hope that none of this has been intended to be a weight on you, but it's been to furthermore draw you into the heart of God and what he's doing, especially here at Northland. And so thanks for taking the time to listen. So may the love of the Father, the grace of his Son, Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. We'll see you next time.